Well, welcome everybody to the School of Public Health's Food for Health 2030 Roundtable. The title today is Breaking Bread and Breaking Barriers with celebrity chef Carla Hall. Delighted to have her along with all of our panelists who we will meet shortly. We present this in collaboration with partners from across the state, including the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum's farm at the Arb. That's what you can see there from behind me. And in case you didn't know, I'm John Finnegan. I'm Dean of the University of Minnesota School of Public Health. And as I mentioned, the farm is at the Arboretum is a garden gallery. And this is a rotation of the living exhibit called Food, Land, and the Great Migration. And it's curated by LaDonna Redmond, and it features a spiral garden that reflects the turning of the seasons, people, and food. It's also interlocking circles that honor and celebrate plants and people, which is part of the journey that we take together, where we gather to hear your stories and raise your voices. I want to take a moment, however, today to acknowledge that as we begin this event, we remind ourselves that the University of Minnesota, as well as the Arboretum and many of our homes, stand on land that has been home to the Dakota people for millennia. We honor them as the forebears of all who have come here. We honor their permanent relationship to this land and their continuing presence as Indigenous people of Minnesota. This was the region that they named the place where the water reflects the sky. I also want to thank all of the guests that are joining us today. And that includes each of our panelists and also our volunteers, Dr. James Rice and Dr. Julia Hallberg, who were central in bringing the vision for this event to life. And of course, Chef Carla Hall, who will be moderating today's conversation. We also invite you to join the conversation on social media by using the hashtag SPHFoodForHealth. And the question and answer section in your Zoom channel is Q&A. That's what you want to use to submit those questions. So I want to say a little bit about the School of Public Health today. We are researchers, we are educators, and we seek to bring science and evidence to a range of topics that are critical to understanding and managing the COVID-19 pandemic and the impact of racism on public health, and so many other issues that affect the health and well-being of people and the populations of Minnesota and all over the world. When you do have time, you might want to check out our SPH website for recent research and news. You will find that in the chat channel, sph.umn.edu. We also have been offering a podcast, which is called Health in All Matters. And we produce that in order to bring better understanding of public health challenges that affect all of us. We include expert voices from our own faculty, as well as from colleagues around the world. And our first series focused on COVID-19, not a surprise. Our second series launched October 15th, and it focuses on also one of the greatest public health challenges that we have today, the impact of racism, which we call a 400-year-old public health emergency. And in particular, we take a look at its impact on the lives of Black Americans. You will be able to find new episodes of that podcast, as well as our previous one, on our SPH website. And you can also find it through your favorite podcast streaming service. We will have time set aside today for question and answers at the end of the time together. You are welcome to submit questions at any time. If you put those questions into the Q&A box on your screen rather than the chat button, we will get to as many of them as possible at the end of our time together. I will remind you that we are recording this webinar, and we encourage you to rewatch it or to share it with your friends and family broadly after the event. So I want to say a few things about the School of Public Health. We are this year 76 years old. We celebrated our 75th last year. And something that you may not know about the school is our engagement with the issue of food and health. This has really been an anchor of the school's work in research as well as in practice and teaching since the beginning of the school. Some of you may know the names Ansel Keys and Henry Blackburn and so many others. They have really perpetuated, they started and have perpetuated the tradition of eating and nutrition and the impact on health, chronic disease, the impact on those that don't have enough food. With COVID, we know from looking at numbers that have been provided by Second Harvest that there is a rise in hunger that's going on right now. 1 in 8 Minnesotans go to bed hungry at night, and 1 in 5 children. And this is the issue of racism, and food availability and access and health is also a campaign priority. These challenges affect especially Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And food and racial justice and equity is a key public health challenge that so many of us at the SPH are involved in. Now, I'm going to ask our division head of the Division of Epidemiology and Community Health to lead us deeper into this issue of food and the background that we have in the School of Public Health. I am delighted to introduce to you Diane Newmark-Steiner. And Diane has been here at the school for a couple of decades. I won't say exactly how long. And I have so much appreciated her leadership in this division. And as you probably know, she is, I would say in this country, one of the best researchers in this area of food and nutrition and health. And it is also my pleasure to let you know that she is the brand new McKnight Presidential Professor of Public Health, so named by the President of the University, Joan Gable. And without further ado, let me pass the baton to Diane Newmark-Steiner. Diane.
Thank you, John, for those kind words. So I am just thrilled to welcome everyone here today to the inaugural event of our Food for Health 2030 initiative. And on the next slide, you'll see some photos of our Division of Epidemiology and Community Health, which is really a unique division across the country because we combined epidemiology, state-of-the-art research with community health. We work with our community partners to develop community interventions, programs, policies, and guidelines to ensure the health of all populations, particularly those who are most vulnerable. Next slide, please. And our faculty work across areas to address the major public health problems facing our country: cancer, cardiovascular disease, infectious disease, substance use, obesity, eating disorders, hunger, and other areas. A common thread between many of these is nutrition. And so on our next slide, you'll see that we decided to embark on a Food for Health initiative. The goal of this initiative is to cultivate partnerships and raise resources so that we can engage in the kind of nutrition-related research, training, and outreach that is needed to improve the health of the public. And one of the studies that we do, which you'll see on the next slide, is a study. I'm presenting it here as an example of one of our research studies. It's a study that I have led for over 2 decades called Project EAT, Eating and Activity Over Time. Next slide. And what you'll see here is, like in many of our studies, we share our findings as widely as possible for greatest impact. We share with scientific audiences and we share with the community. We also train the next generation of healthcare professionals to address the big public health problems. And On our panel today, you're going to hear from one of our students, Trisha Alexander, who is working on Project EAT. Next slide, please. So here you kind of have an overview of Project EAT. It's a program of research that follows 2 cohorts of young people drawn from Minneapolis, St. Paul, and surrounding schools over the past 15 years. And you can keep going with the slides. Thank you. That's good. And what happened was when COVID broke out, we knew there was going to be a problem with food insecurity, with eating patterns. So we decided immediately to go and survey our participants. And I'm going to share one number with you. We have many, many numbers in our study. On the next slide, you will see a very sobering number. Among our young adults drawn from Minneapolis, St. Paul schools when they were in junior high school and high school, 30% were experiencing food insecurity. Nearly a third of our young adults. This is a huge problem. This is why our Food for Health initiative decided to focus on the issue of food insecurity. It lies at the intersection of social inequities, economic downfall during COVID, racism, inadequate social services, and really with COVID, just the background for a perfect storm. Today in our presentations, we're going to hear stories from the field. We're going to hear some different numbers. Most importantly, we're going to hear about solutions to this problem, and we invite your input here. We need to address this problem. Although the problem is a sobering one, our moderator for today's program is anything but sobering. We are thrilled to have Carla Hall, and we'll see her on our next slide, who will serve as the moderator for our program today. Carla Hall, as you know, is a world famous chef. She is on many TV shows. She cooks for us. She engages us. She is an author of cookbooks. Highly, highly recommend this cookbook. The love of food and family and traditions just pops up from the pages. And she is a social advocate. She's involved with work addressing topics close to our hearts, such as diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism. She is a weaver. This is my impression. She weaves food together with culture and family and people. And that's what I think food needs to do. So Carla will moderate our panel today with our partner organizations who are working at the intersection of food, COVID, and social inequities. We're going to hear about some positive solutions to these serious problems. And I'm going to hand it over to you, Carla, to take it away. Thank you so much to you and to our panelists.
Thank you so much, Diane. I appreciate it. Hi, everybody. How are you? I am so excited to be here. As Diane said, this is something that is near and dear to my heart. I cook, but I also feel that food brings us together. I think there is one thing to make bread together or to break bread together. It's another thing to make bread together. I am so honored to bring 8 distinct voices from the University of Minnesota partners issuing, we're talking about issues that we're facing today, issues that we are facing even more so than we were 7 months ago. And you all, knowing what you do, understand the urgency. But for me, it's playing catch up and understanding and getting to know these partners, and how excited I am to talk about their research and how not only dire, but where the work can continue and actually get better, and where there are solutions. I feel that food not only feeds our bodies, but it grounds us in our culture and our identity. And I think it's really important to see our identity in the food that we eat and to understand the connections to our culture. When I was doing my cookbook, Carla Hall's Soul Food, Every Day in Celebration, I used the idea, if my great grandmother came from Nigeria or Bioko Islands, what would she be eating today? And what are the foods that made it through the African diaspora that are here in the States that can connect me to that history? And those are the foods that I have, that I've decided to focus on, like millet and sorghum and all of these things that were here, but how they relate to Native Indigenous, and corn versus cassava. And when I think about hot water cornbread that was eaten by my ancestors here in the States because corn was available versus cassava, and how that transpired, and how we are all in this together and we borrow from each other's cultures, and that is a true melting pot. But when one person's culture dies and goes away because they aren't given the access to this food, that is a problem. What should be a right and is a struggle, and because it's a struggle, then our children aren't learning. Because they aren't learning, they aren't growing to their potential. And because they aren't growing to their potential, then they're dependent on welfare, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not just one person's problem. It's everyone's problem. And it's everyone's problem to solve. And that's why I am so excited to be here. We're going to hear about food justice, or the injustice, access, food equity and inequity, and it is going to be really exciting. So I hope you have come here just ready to learn and to hear and to listen and to be inspired by all of these partners. Our first panelist is Trisha Alexander. She's a second-year public health nutrition MPH student and dietetic intern at the University of Minnesota School of Public Health. She is a research assistant for the Project EAT study and intern for People of Color and Indigenous Caucus. Welcome, Trisha.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Like Carla said, my name is Trisha. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And today I'll be talking to you a bit about the results and themes we gathered from the Project EAT study survey that we sent out this past spring. Next slide, please. So as you can see from this graph here, participants of mixed race or who chose other for their race have the highest rates of being food insecure in the past year. African American and Black participants had the second highest rates. Both of these racial and ethnic groups also experienced the highest rates of food insufficiency in the past month. Keep in mind, as I said before, the surveys were disseminated this past spring of 2020. And overall, there were more participants who were food insecure over the past year than food insufficient in the past month. Next slide, please. So we found some demographic connections with food insecurity, one of them being parental socioeconomic status. Those who had parents from low and low middle to middle socioeconomic status were more likely to experience food insecurity. Those receiving WIC or SNAP, those living with a child or multiple children in the home, as well as those who were unemployed or temporarily laid off due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Access to a car or personal vehicle also affected someone's food access. Next slide, please. Here are the trends we found among food insecure respondents. It is pivotal to note how the COVID-19 pandemic and the murder of George Floyd, both occurring under the Trump administration, exacerbated some participants' experiences, especially those who identify as Black, Indigenous, and people of color. It is also important to note how the uprisings in Minneapolis and St. Paul affected food access for numerous residents in the Twin Cities. Food insecure respondents were more likely to experience unsafe neighborhood conditions, as well as discrimination, harassment, and/or racism. Food insecure respondents were also less likely to have nutritious foods available at home and more likely to eat at food from fast food restaurants. Next slide, please. Some key themes we gathered: participants were either eating less to support their children because they now had to provide meals that their child typically received in school or at daycare. But we also saw some participants eating more to cope with the anxiety, stress, and other mood changes we all experienced and continue to experience during this pandemic. A lot more bulk shopping was happening with participants, including more non-perishables and frozen foods, much less purchasing of fruits and vegetables for a multitude of reasons, main one being they don't last long, as well as some participants wanting to avoid possibly getting COVID-19 from fresh produce, which we now know is very unlikely to happen. Also, participants were either eating out less due to fear of contracting COVID-19 or eating at more fast food restaurants because of the drive-through option. Next slide, please. Here's some resources that participants mentioned they needed or found most helpful. Something positive is we have already seen some of these needs being addressed since we collected this data, such as increase in food delivery and pickup services, restocking of food items at grocery stores, and use of food assistance benefits for online grocery shopping. Minnesota is one of the states that was approved by the federal government to issue pandemic EBT, which continues today. I do want to highlight, though, the need for culturally diverse options in school food programs and at food shelves to really serve the diverse communities that are in need at this moment. I also want to highlight the need for expanded eligibility for the stimulus and relief funds. Because too often young adults, especially Black, Indigenous, and of color, as well as international students and immigrants, fall through the cracks when it comes to government assistance programs and initiatives. Next slide, please. Here is a list of the organizations we have shared our findings with so far. All of these stakeholders have a role in supporting the needs of food insecure young adults in the Twin Cities metro area. Next slide, please. If you would like more information, you may go on the Project EAT website. I've put together a couple of summary briefs from the findings of the study that include suggestions for how stakeholders can address the needs of food insecure young adults and their families during the COVID-19 pandemic. The briefs can be found under the News tab on the Project EAT website. Thank you all very much for listening.
Trisha, thank you for sharing your findings. I was really struck with how many of the participants came back to continue in the study over the 15-year period, and which was really impressive. Can you tell me what was the most surprising finding that you saw during this study, maybe post-COVID versus pre-COVID?
Sure. I'd say the most surprising finding for me post-COVID was how many participants didn't receive a stimulus check to this day, or were told they're ineligible for a stimulus check for various reasons. One being that they were able to be claimed as a dependent, although most of their parents or guardians did not claim them. So they just kind of fell into through the cracks, as I mentioned, and there's been no real follow-up for these students. Some of them have tried even talking to different government agencies, and it's pretty much, they've been told you're just out of luck, which is very unfortunate.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So Melissa Laska is a distinguished McKnight University professor at the University of Minnesota School of Public Health in the Division of Epidemiology and Community Health. She is also co-director of the Healthy Weight Research Center and a member of the Masonic Cancer Center. Laska's expertise is in nutrition and obesity prevention. Please welcome Melissa.
Thank you so much, Carla. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I wanted, in the few minutes I have today, I wanted to say a little bit about a portfolio of work that we've been building over a number of years now, trying to understand and to help better support getting more healthy options into local food stores. Next slide, please. In public health, we think about not just the individuals and individual behaviors, but we think about the larger context in which those individuals are located. And we think about the ways in which communities are built and structured to either support healthy decisions or to not support healthy decisions. And one of the big challenges that so many of us have been grappling with over a number of years now has been that many Americans don't have access to healthy foods in the communities in which they live. And we know especially that marginalized communities, communities that suffer from the biggest health struggles are the communities that don't have access to healthy food. They don't necessarily have supermarkets or grocery stores. They do have a lot of access to retailers that traditionally haven't stocked healthy food. Next slide, please. So there are a number of ways to think about bringing healthy food into communities. And while it's fantastic if we can think about building a brand new grocery store, and there's a lot of appeal to that kind of option, one thing that we've kept on coming back to from the things that we hear from community members is that small food retailers can really be important community assets. These are business owners who are interwoven into the fabric of many neighborhoods. They're meeting a number of community needs. They're interested in serving the needs of community. And so we think that it's really important, as do many others, to help support those businesses in trying to stock and sell more healthy foods. Next. You can click one more time. Yeah. So you can go back. So over the years, we've worked in a number of cases. We've had a privilege of working with healthy corner store programs, for example, that provide technical assistance to retailers that step forward and volunteer and say, yes, I want to stock and sell more healthy food. How can you support me? Next slide. And we've built out from that area of research into a number of other areas. One of the biggest projects that we just finished is to evaluate the Minneapolis Staple Foods Ordinance. The Staple Foods Ordinance is a very unique policy passed in Minneapolis, the first and one of the only of its kind, where Minneapolis City Council was really trying to grapple with this issue that residents were coming forward saying they didn't have access to healthy foods in their communities, and they really wanted certain kinds of foods in the food stores that were available. So City Council tied healthy food availability to food licensing for retailers. So if you want to have a food store in Minneapolis, in order to have a license, you need to stock minimum quantities and varieties of healthy foods, specifically healthy foods that somebody could go in and buy and take home to their family and feel like they could reasonably put together a meal that they would feel good about. Next slide, please. As part of the Staple Foods Ordinance evaluation, which we call the STORE study, we were funded by NIH and CDC for a 5-year period to really go in and look at the impacts of this ordinance, which became of national interest to other cities that were interested in doing something similar. We did hundreds of store assessments, hundreds of interviews with managers and owners. You can click one more time. We did thousands of interviews with customers outside of stores as they purchased food. Next slide. And there were a number of products that came from this work that I'm really proud of, and I think really kind of exemplify some of the things that we can do well in public health. We had such generosity of retailers and of community members in sharing their knowledge and insights with us on what was working with the ordinance, what wasn't working, what were some of the challenges, what needed to be fixed. Click one more time. Through doing this study, we were really able to create such fantastic opportunities, training opportunities for students, for our next generation of public health practitioners. We had over 40 opportunities created for students who are training in this area. And it was important not just for the sake of training and policy evaluation, so we can know what kinds of policies work and what don't, but also from the perspective of giving students access to community members' insights in their lives and their food stores and how they felt and what their values are. And I know this impacted a number of our students so deeply. Next slide, please. We had some great partnerships, most specifically with the Minneapolis Health Department. This idea of having local government and university partnerships alongside with community, I think is just such a trifecta of really being able to bring some innovative ideas forward and enhance health. We were also able to create some nice feedback loops with getting what we learned back out to the community, back out to the Department of Health, to the legislature. Next slide, please, or click one more time. Yeah. And one of the most important feedback loops that we had is feeding back to City Council. We were able to go back to Minneapolis City Council, say, look, this is what we learned. Here's what's not working about the ordinance. And to their credit, they were able to take those findings, go out to their constituents, build on the knowledge that of what we had learned, and take that in and revise the ordinance in a way that we hope has been more helpful in giving stores more flexibility in being able to meet the needs of their customers. We have not yet been able to get evaluation funds to go back into the field a second time and figure out how those changes are working, but we really hope to do that in the near future, as well as to find out how stores are managing with COVID. This has been a tremendous event in store owners' business models, and they're really coping with it in some interesting ways. Next. I would be negligent, I'm just going to say this as one last piece, I would be negligent if I didn't mention what a large system this is part of in Minnesota in particular. There are so many factors and so many players doing really innovative work around this area. And it's not just one player that I think is going to make the difference here. It's all of these folks coming together for a real system of change. So you can just click through these slides. We have institutions addressing distribution needs, providing equipment to retailers. You'll hear from Tasha Powell in a little bit about appetites for change work and community leadership. We have Extension working in outstate Minnesota. We've partnered with them on social marketing and community building. We're part of Minnesotans for Healthy Kids, really guiding important policy in this area. Next slide, please. We really think that it takes a village to make these things happen. Changes to the food system are slow, but so important that we all hang in there and make these important changes. If you're interested in learning more about the store study, our website is here. My contact information, as well as the collaborators that worked with me on the study, are also here. Thank you for your time.
Melissa, thank you so much. I'm thinking about everything that you're saying, and I'm looking at your pictures, and I'm looking at pictures of the stores, and I see that wall of potato chips and candy, and it's tempting. And also they are products that a store owner can go and buy, and the expiration date is going to be much longer than something that is fresh, like produce and bananas and fruit, whatever, fruit juices. What other incentives does the small retailers have in order to do this and in working with the community?
There are some limits to the incentives. We know that manufacturers of less healthful products often provide a lot of incentives to having manufacturers and stores stock these kinds of products. A lot of the store owners that we've talked to really feel, I've really been struck over the years at how much they want to do right by their communities and how connected they are to the communities. In addition to that, there are some benefits. For example, if they can get authorized through the Women, Infants, and Children program, through the state level government, where women and infants who are in the program can bring vouchers for food, they can provide healthy foods to those folks in the program. But really, to me, it's been such a striking driving force, the commitment that these retailers have to their communities.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So next up, we have Thierry Ibri. He is the Chief Operations and Program Officer at Second Harvest Heartland, the second largest food bank in the nation. He is here today representing Minnesota Central Kitchen, an initiative of Second Harvest Heartland. Thierry?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Our mission here at Second Harvest Heartland is to end hunger together with our community partners. And our experience has been broad over the years. We do food sourcing, we do manufacturers donation, we rescue food at retailers donation, we distribute to food shelf, shelters, meal programs. We are active in public policy and program advocacy. Yet, until March this year, we had never worked to end hunger through prepared meals. All food distributed was groceries. And so, as with all things this year, we saw an opportunity to further our mission, born out of the pandemic crisis, to meet the challenges in front of us heads on, together with dozens of community partners. Next slide, please. So what we saw is at the end of February, beginning of March, we saw a lot of restaurants closing. We saw a lot of people working in those restaurants being laid off or furloughed. And we saw a lot of food potentially being wasted. So we just had a very simple idea. And we said, what if we rescue that food and then we contract some of those idle kitchens to make meals for people who are in our community that are most acutely impacted by COVID-19. And then we make meals and we distribute meals. So we got together with our first two partners, Chow Girls Catering, who was our first kitchen partner, and Loaves and Fishes, to do exactly that. Rescue food, make meals with re-employing people, and distribute those meals to food insecure people in our community. Next slide, please. So incredibly, since March, we've expanded this operation to 11 kitchen sites. And these kitchen sites are everything from big name caterer in the area, corporate kitchens, job training programs, community building nonprofits. And two of our partners are here on the panel. So I want to recognize here Dana and Tasha that are really good partners with us at Minnesota Central Kitchen. And today, our 5 distribution partners are delivering 25,000 meals each week to more than 50 meal sites. And I'm really excited to share with you all that just this week, we will be distributing our 1 millionth prepared meals to our community since March. So pretty proud of this achievement, born out of a phone call on a Saturday afternoon to do this. So as you can see here on the slide, this is MCK, or what we like to call MCK, which is Minnesota Central Kitchen. But the numbers are not the only story. There are deeper, more complicated problems that we are hoping to address through prepared meals. First of all, as everybody has talked about, the pandemic has created historic level of food insecurity in our region and deepened the hunger divide between white communities and communities of colors. So at the Minnesota Central Kitchen, we prepare meals for anyone experiencing the hunger surge from COVID-19. And we make special effort to serve those who might not otherwise be able to cook. So those who are sick, unhoused, homebound, frontline or essential workers, their children, and the people that are lower income or communities of color. And we hope that the prepared meal will provide a moment of reprieve for most of all during those trying times. So why prepare meals as a solution? Well, prepared meals, they meet a critical need, especially now. First of all, they're a better source of nutrition, as we just talked about with the previous panelist, than many other available food resources. Also, there's less stigma in receiving a meal. Like, for example, there's no identification or personal information required. They are accessible to the community, and then they support those with no ability or very little ability or time to cook. As I said, our tagline is that we seek to nourish communities through collaboration, through partnership, and we have a lot of partners that are doing this work with us. First of all, local farmers from whom we source from, specifically Black, Indigenous, and people of color farmers supported with our partnership with the Good Acre, which is another great organization in the Twin Cities. Second, Appetite for Change, who are preparing and delivering meals to the north side of the city, the YMCA and Heritage Park. The Hmong and Latinx menu, we have also, Hmongs and Latinx menu options for the Roseville School District, where we deliver meals for families that don't have food during the weekend. And also we are providing warm meals to our unhoused neighbors in encampments in Minneapolis and St. Paul. So when we launched Minnesota Central Kitchen back in March, I'm not sure that anyone would have thought that we would have served 1 million meals by Thanksgiving. But unfortunately, we see the need for food and prepared meals that will persist well beyond the next year. And I think this is, personally, I think this is linked to the virus, but not only. I think the economic recovery is going to be slow, and that level of food insecurity is going to persist in our community here in the Twin Cities and across the United States. So we will continue to do our work by trying to work even more with diverse sourcing partners, continue to expand our kitchen partners and our distribution partners, and also try to distribute more meals through different channels like food shelves and maybe home delivery options as well. And I will conclude by inviting all of you to join us. If you're a restaurant, if you're a business, and you can become a kitchen partner. Commercial kitchen can also donate through an app that we call Meal Connect. Of course, donations of non-food kitchen items are always accepted, financial gifts. And please follow us because there's news every day about Minnesota Central Kitchen on Instagram or Facebook. And with this, I thank you for the opportunity to talk about Minnesota Central Kitchen.
Thierry, what an incredible achievement. I mean, 1 million meals since March, that's incredible. I mean, on so many levels, I think the re-employment, I feel like, and maybe because I'm a chef, chefs are so incredibly generous. They're like, they just want to cook and cook for people. It's our love language. I know that you talked about the food rescue, especially when the restaurants in the beginning of COVID, you know, they were sort of in this middle phase of not knowing what they were going to do and the shutdowns, and they couldn't open their doors. So I understand the food recovery there. Going forward with these meals, are you using some of the food that is generally in the food bank and turning that into meals? Or how has the food rescue changed since COVID, and how are you going to meet the demands? Because I can only see it going up.
So 2 things. First of all, we do a lot of food rescue in general at the food bank. If you can believe it, we rescue about 40 million pounds of food just from grocery stores every day. And that food is going in 24 hours from the grocery store to the food shelves and being distributed to people that are experiencing food insecurity. Specifically for restaurant, yes, you're right. We had a lot of food at the very beginning of the pandemic, and that has come down quite a bit since then. But yes, we've also made the food available at the food bank available to the restaurant, so they cook with it. And I think now they use about, that represents about 80% of the ingredients that they use, so they only have to buy 20% of the ingredients. And then the third thing is that we're trying to really be more active with food service distributors like the Ciscos of the world to try to be bigger donors to us. So we're just hiring a position actually at Minnesota Central Kitchen just to do that. So yeah, great question. Thank you, Carla.
No, that's fantastic. I've been very much involved in DC Central Kitchen, so I understand and appreciate your work. So thank you.
We love Robert Egger. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next panelist is Dana Thompson, lineal descendant of the Dakota tribes and a lifetime Minnesota native. Dana is co-owner of the company, The Sous Chef, and has been working within the food sovereignty movement for the past 6 years. Last year, Dana jointly funded the nonprofit NATIS, N-A-T-I-F-S, North American Traditional Indigenous Food Systems. Welcome, Dana.
Hello, Carla. I am going to go ahead and start my video and then go back to this slide too. I'm not sure if we can toggle. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here to represent the nonprofit North American Traditional Indigenous Food Systems. And the mission of this organization is to promote Indigenous foodways education and facilitate Indigenous food access. And my partner Sean and I have been working with the company The Sous Chef, which we own for the last 6 years. And through this organization, we've been dedicated to addressing the economic and health crises, which is affecting Native communities, and reestablishing Native foodways throughout North America. So we imagine a new North American food system that generates wealth and improves health in Native communities through food-related enterprises. Natives has established an Indigenous Food Lab here in Minneapolis, the heart of the revolution, that houses a professional Indigenous kitchen and training center covering all aspects of food service, research and development, Indigenous food identification, gathering, cultivation and preparation, and all components of starting and running a successful culinary business based around Native traditions and Indigenous foods. And we call that leveraging Indigenous wisdom, which is something that has been lost and we are trying to reclaim. So over the course of the pandemic, we have shifted our priorities. We originally were planning on opening a culinary training restaurant and associated commissary kitchen, which would also act as a training kitchen for tribal communities. But it's so dangerous for people from tribal communities to travel right now that we have shifted to doing a food effort for a COVID response. As Thierry was talking about, we were working with Minnesota Central Kitchen. We have shifted now because the state of Minnesota has asked for us to meet a need. Just this month alone, we have 15,000 meals going out the door to tribal communities with the intent to protect elders and their families and other at-risk age groups. And these healthy, culturally relevant foods are really important for building immunity and preventing diseases. These foods, if you eliminate the colonial ingredients, which are wheat flour, dairy, and refined sugar, just to start, then you lower that glycemic index and you increase nutrient density. And so these healthy, culturally relevant foods build immunity and prevent diseases. And another part of our mission is by purchasing from tribal community producers to drive economic health back into Indian country. So once the pandemic is over, we will shift back to the Indigenous Food Lab hope of opening a modern Indigenous kitchen to teach food service skills to people from tribal communities in an urban location. And this Native Foodways is also going to be a classroom and an educational studio. So we're developing video programming right now to try to meet this educational need and to develop Indigenous curriculum and educational resources that will be open to the public. So anyone can access this. And we want to support and develop anything that can help tribal communities to create and maintain Indigenous focused kitchens. And that could be anything from a one-person catering operation, a one-person foraging operation, to a full-scale restaurant. And our hope is really just the reclamation of ancestral education as a critical part of really just reversing the damage of colonialism and forced assimilation, and knowing that food is at the heart of this reclamation. Natives is going to drive sustainable economic empowerment and prosperity into tribal areas through a reimagined North American food system that addresses the health impacts of these injustices. The act of recognizing this is deeply important, not only to tribal communities, but to our entire culture. Thank you.
Ah, there's so much I want to talk to you about, Dana. Okay, where do I begin? There's so much in my head. And I think the thing is, I absolutely understand the importance of reconnecting and reclaiming this food. But also you're doing two major things. You're reclaiming your history and your culture and the importance of that, but you're also having to feed people. And right. When you're talking to people, and I know that there's pre-COVID and post-COVID, when you're talking to people, is which conversation, and maybe it's equal, the conversation of feeding versus the conversation of reclaiming the food, and to say this food is healthy for you and it is more sustainable versus just thinking about sustenance. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I hear what you're saying. And for our organization, we just have this really lucky, just this amazing chef at the helm. My partner, Chef Sean, makes these deeply medicinal foods beautiful on a plate. And even with these thousands and thousands of meals that are going out the door this month, the recipes are just incredible. They're so beautiful that I don't think anyone would even know they're healthy. So you're right. We have to kind of consider the different demographics of the people that we're talking to. There's different types of education that are necessary from all different aspects because of the erasure of this Indigenous knowledge. Even very educated people don't have access to a lot of this information that was systematically removed by the US government.
Right. Okay, we'll continue this conversation offline. Thank you, Dana.
Thanks so much.
Our fifth panelist is Kelsey Ganser, the manager of Rutabaga Project, a joint initiative between Arrowhead Economic Opportunity Agency, AEOA, and Iron Range Partnership for Sustainability, IRPS. Hello, Kelsey.
Hi, thanks for having me. Yeah, lots of acronyms to start it out. So yes, I manage the Rutabaga Project, and I also am the Food Access Manager at AEOA. And so the Rutabaga Project was started at the beginning of 2016, focusing on how do we create food access for low-income individuals, but also local healthy food access for all. And the project began with conversations in 3 low-income neighborhoods in Virginia, Minnesota. So you can see on the screen, this is a kind of rough timeline of the project. I began in 2018. And so these are some of the initiatives that were identified by community members as a way to create greater access. So you can see we started community gardens. We began a farmer's market. We also currently support EBT, SNAP, and Power at 4 farmers markets in Northeast Minnesota. Last year, we planted a food forest, which is a perennial edible garden. And that was very exciting this year because we finally got some fruit from those trees. And so that all was very consumer focused. We also put in some nutrition cupboards, which look like little free libraries, but we filled them with food items. So we have 4 of those throughout the community as well. So that was all very consumer focused. And then at the beginning of last year, we received a USDA Farmers Market Promotion Program grant. And we had all these grand ideas to work with farmers, doing farmer training, local food marketing, increasing local food sales. And some of that has happened, but of course, COVID happened at the beginning of 2020 and kind of blew up some of our plans. Next slide, please. And so we really began to look at how do you create long-term food system resiliency while addressing the immediate needs in the community? And so we saw this sudden need for emergency food response. And AEOA currently works as works with the area food shelves, but we have never done food distribution ourselves. So I got on the phone with the USDA through their coronavirus food assistance program and their farmers to family food boxes. And we started receiving semi-trucks full of, first it was fresh produce, and now starting this week, we'll be receiving 2 semi-trucks of food each week to distribute throughout Northeast Minnesota. And so to date, we've distributed over 1 million pounds of food through that program since the start of COVID. Our plans now are to go through the end of December or longer if USDA expands that program. We were also able to secure funds for shelf-stable meals. It says on the screen 64,000, but this data has just been changing so quickly too. So that number is probably closer to 90,000 at this point. We've also connected with all of our senior clients to see what their needs are. And then we continued with that, creating the sustainable food system by supporting some of our local producers. So we've been able to purchase $43,000 worth of local food since the start of COVID, and we hope to increase that number as well. So while we're trying to meet this immediate need, we're also trying to continue to build a strong food system into the future. So we're working with a number of different partners throughout Northeast Minnesota on regional project planning for infrastructure projects like processing facilities. We're working as part of a land trust group to establish that for individuals who historically have not had access to land. We're working to support a food sovereignty group, and we've developed a teaching kitchen model that we hope to implement in the future. So trying to meet the needs now, but also continue to do the work that will set us up for a strong food system in the future. Thanks.
Kelsey, thank you. I feel like 1 million seems to be the magic number. 1 million pounds of food, 1 million meals distributed. It's a really big and impressive number. I was wondering if you could tell me if you see the effects of the empowerment or the effects of actually growing your own food in the community and what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that especially with coronavirus, this was the first time that many people saw a disruption to their food chain, and having access, whether it's you growing your own food yourself or just knowing the person who grows your food, knowing where it comes from, and having, so whatever type of knowledge that is, whether it's your own knowledge or just knowing the person who holds the knowledge, it creates a greater level of security. And I think just strengthens everyone, whether it's the person receiving the food, growing their own food, or the person growing it for others. It strengthens the community through relationships and just provides greater knowledge for all.
I agree wholeheartedly. And I love rutabagas, by the way. I love the name. Thank you so much. Next is Ellie Lucas, founder and executive director of Hunger Impact Partners, an organization that works to ensure that children have access to food. Ellie also served as the chief campaign officer of Hunger Free Minnesota. Welcome, Ellie.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you, Carla, and to everyone who's participating today. I can't wait for the new restaurant on the Mississippi River that Chef Paul's got going, or excuse me, Chef Sean has going to open soon. So lots of exciting things, I think, in terms of what's happening in our communities, and I'm very impressed with all the work. Hunger Impact Partners, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit, is focused on hungry kids in Minnesota, working with schools and communities to increase enrollment and participation in federal nutrition programs. So we fund efforts to remove barriers to access in childcare centers, schools, after-school programs, and during the summer. You'll hear data points from me because the foundation of our work is grounded in a data analytics tool that we created called the Child Nutrition Index. And it helps us identify areas across the state where there are high concentrations of food insecure kids. It tells us the ages of those kids and also what meals they're missing. we have over 500,000 kids, actually, you'll see the number on this slide, who are at risk for hunger. That translates to approximately 112 million missing meals statewide. And we've been able to calibrate through research studies that have been done what the education costs are associated with kids that go hungry. And that number is 238 million. We also know that there is a matching healthcare cost associated with this as well, and it is approximately the same level. So big numbers associated with kids that are going hungry, both in education and in healthcare implications. We know too that the impact will only escalate due to COVID. The next slide, we'll advance, is to sort of set the stage. In 2019, the school year data, you'll see that the problem is not new. We look at these numbers and conservatively, we say 1 in 3 children are living in homes that are at risk for hunger. And we know that we can validate these numbers based on the data that we look at. And we think that this number will increase, obviously, due to the circumstances surrounding the pandemic. But 45 kids are participating in school breakfast, only 45. And those are the kids, many more are eligible, but we're only serving that many. And that, again, this is in the 2019 school year. 9 kids were participating in after-school meals, and 57 children 5 and under were actually getting meals provided through the WIC program. So these are the primary federal programs that we concentrate on that are intended to provide meals for kids 365 days a year, three meals per day. Next slide, please. The problem that we're trying to solve is closing the meal gap for these kids. We have an unacceptable level of food insecurity. We've all talked about that today. Kids of color, Indigenous people make up 1/3 of the state's 331,000 kids in K through 12. Disparities are obvious. Again, many of the panelists have talked about the consequences of this. And it's important to note that many families were, I want to emphasize, working poor. They were the working poor in the context of being food insecure. And that's changed again now due to COVID. And so we're going to look at those numbers in just a minute. But the federal programs for children are drastically underutilized. And we've talked about this, I think now, and when I was running Hunger Free Minnesota, we talked about the increasing the levels of participation. And there has been a lot of good work done to do that, but there is more that needs to be done. COVID has created a unique situation. Next slide, please. As a result of the work that we've been doing, and again, focusing on these federal programs and getting more children enrolled in the programs and participating, together with our statewide network, we have looked at adding 1.8 million new meals. And so this data runs up to 2019. So December of 2019, we could calibrate the number of claimed meals based on data that we were collecting through the Minnesota Department of Ed, Minnesota Department of Health, and also DHS, that allows us to look at 100,000, cells of data and come back and say how many meals were actually generated in each market. It corresponds with reimbursement revenue, and that's what's used to sustain the programs going forward. So if the nonprofit goes away or the support structure that goes away that is providing these federal meals, they have sustainable revenue based on the reimbursement value. And we're looking at $24.6 million new dollars that came into the state based on the increase in participation rates in the meals that were added. And these are all part of the federally funded USDA Child Hunger Meal Platform. Next slide. This is something I wanted to spend a few minutes on just because it is so critical now to be looking at this data relevant to where we were and relevant to what happened in May of 2019. And there is a data lag, so I don't have information as up to date as I would like to have for you, but this is something that we did create. And I think what we're finding is that in many of us that are at least working in the space that I am around encouraging more children to be, participating in these school meal programs or childcare programs or after school programs, is that the work is shifting in what it is that we're funding. We worked very diligently with MDE and USDA Food and Nutrition Services to work on waivers and have, had a slew of them available to us to try to figure out how we could make it better and easier for the school organizations and the community organizations that were running federal meal programs. And one of the things that I think was quite pivotal in all of this was the fact that you could serve 7 days a week of meals versus 5. There were a lot of things that were changed as a result of, I think, quick action by USDA in the very beginning in March. And that has now been extended through the 2021 school year to June. But there are some modifications on the specific federal program. But you can see, if you look at these numbers and you look at during COVID, you'll see the increase in participation because they were able to bundle meals. So a couple of points that I think are takeaways from all of this is that there's a better method of distribution using schools as meal centers. There's more that we can do there to really make sure kids have access. And a lot of that has to do with increasing the meals. And you guys talked about this today, also has to do with the quality of the meals and the relevance of the meals and lots of other things that many are working on. We are primarily focused on getting those kids in an environment or getting them access by removing the barriers to access so that they can consume those meals during the course of the day. Particularly this spring, I wanted to give a big shout out to the schools and the school districts that we worked with. We funded a lot of schools across the state. We worked in partnership with MDE and the USDA in terms of the grants that were coming into Minnesota, and they exceeded all expectations, working so diligently to make a lot happen for kids that are struggling. And again, you'll see the references to the students of color in this mix as well. So we had an increase in the number of meals that were provided. Whether that will be sustainable, I don't know. The other thing that we're going to start to see too is, and this is relatively new, is the role of the evening meal. We've been able to do breakfast and lunch, but now we got to figure out how we're going to be able to provide that third meal to kids. The next slide, when you had asked what's next, you were probably aware of the fact, or many of you I know on this call that I work with regularly, of the Free Meals for Kids mobile app. We had a mobile platform that we used to help children source meals in the summer. We were able to quickly deploy that and use it as the primary and centralized meal source for free meals for kids across the state. There are approximately 900 sites on that app right now. You download it to your phone and you have additional resources that are available to families that are struggling. Translated all of these materials in 5 different languages, worked with the county health departments across the state. And that's the ongoing technology solution that we will continue to run through the course of the year. The other thing is we continue to do funding for schools and look for ways that we can really enhance what they're trying to do. There are a lot of issues that are being raised with the inclement weather in Minnesota here. We're getting ready to get, maybe 5 more inches of snow, and what they might need to make modifications in terms of delivering meals to kids. But in addition to these things, when I think what would be so critical for the group of panelists that are participating in this and those that are influencers across the state is to be thinking about what we can do on the policy and the advocacy front. The overall effort to streamline the federal child nutrition programs, they all have the same mission, but they need alignment when it comes to regulatory compliance and reimbursement rates. And I think that there's a real opportunity for us to lead the nation to find a way where we can do a better job of making the delivery of these federal meals more equitable, easier to access, easier to implement, and in many cases, self-sustaining with the reimbursement revenue. So thank you very much, everybody. It's a real honor to be here.
Ellie, this is a lot of great information. I feel like I have to go through with the fine-tooth comb. I know that just in reading all of your information, the distribution disparity between the need and the distribution is great. I mean, it's even getting larger. Is part of it because in northern Minnesota, in the rural areas, or in finding those people? What accounts for that disparity?
It's quite interesting. I'm waiting for my little, can you hear me okay? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, the data tells us where these kids are and where across the state. So we know the markets, we know the areas, we know what sort of services are coming into those states or into those areas. And there are different challenges. And so it isn't a one size fits all. In many cases, when we're doing the funding, we really have to work closely with that school district or that site and try to zero in on what those issues might be. So we could be looking at data points that are relevant to you have X number of children, 75% of them are eligible for free and reduced price meals. Where is it that we can help you with your infrastructure to make sure those kids are getting meals? And it could be a delivery mechanism. It could be the equipment that they're using. It could be the meals that they're serving. It could be the need for a mobile unit. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we try to sort of zero in on. Clearly, the rural areas have the biggest challenges. And in many cases that we saw that with the summer meals is there weren't meals being offered in those communities. And so trying to figure out how we can fortify the infrastructure so that either community sites or schools participate in providing meals when kids aren't in school. Now, of course, with COVID, we're just seeing those numbers where the schools are becoming the central places, but their pickup or their delivery.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Right, so next we have Tasha Powell. She is the Director of Operations and co-founder of Appetite for Change, an organization whose mission is to use food as a tool to build health, wealth, and social change in North Minneapolis. Tasha is a lifelong North Minneapolis resident and is active in the local food justice movement to advocate for her and to give back to her community. Please welcome Tasha Powell. Tasha?
Sorry, I'm still on mute. That happens all the time. Hi, our flagship program is called Community Cooks. We started this program back in 2012, and it was very important for us, although I am a native Northsider, to figure out what the community wanted to see within a community. So we did these 8 workshops and invited community members to come. We service about 400 individuals. That's kind of equivalent to 296 family. And we brought them together in a church space and prepared a meal with each other. So we cooked, we ate, and we talked, and we had a dialogue around what did they want to see in their community. And after the 8 workshops and looking at the surveys that we conducted, we found out that many of the residents liked it, that they liked it cooking, eating, and talking. That was something new, and they got to meet neighbors and complete strangers and got in to rub elbows with each other and realized that they had a lot of similarities than differences. We also heard from them that they wanted to learn a little bit more about policy. They also wanted to learn a little bit about urban farming. And we also had a couple of questions on there that kind of related to youth, what we think youth wanted to see in the community. And at that time, my daughter was a youth, and as well as one of the other founders of Appetite for Change, Princess Haley's son, was there. And they was like, how's y'all having this conversation? There's no youth at the table. Y'all need to hear the voices of the youth. So Community Cooks, we thought it was very important to have a family workshop, a new moms workshop, and a youth workshop. And this way, each group can have their own special settings. And we thought it was very unique for new moms because some of the ones that showed up to these early workshops really, sometimes realized that it's a lot trying to prepare a meal for each other. So at these workshops, we wanted to not have them get in the kitchen and cook with each other. So we catered their meals. We catered their meals for them. And then we had specialists come in like doulas, breastfeeders, yoga instructors to come in to teach them some healthy way of doing the exercises and different ways of preparing food. We taught them how to make baby food from scratch and also how to make toddler food from scratch. And right now, what we are doing since COVID, we partnered with many organizations like Metro Food Justice Network, Minnesota Health Fairview, Eastside Table, the Food Group, The Good Acre, the Farmer Lease Farm, Local Crate, and DoorDash. Since the murder of George Floyd in the uprising, and COVID came into this circle, we weren't able to cook together anymore. We still wanted to provide nutrition options for the community and recipes. And we also saw an increase in food insecurity as people lost jobs, grocery stores was closing, and access to food became more limited. And so the Community Cooks Meal Box was born. We heard from, next slide please. We heard from some recipients that they are enjoying the recipes, that these boxes have relieved worry about food insecurity, that their kids are enjoying and getting involved in the kitchen, and that the meals are tasty. Next slide. Well, next for Appetite for Change is to take this program into 2021 and keep putting food into the tables of people who need it. Within these community cooking box are 2 meals. It feeds up to a family of 6. We have a vegetarian meal, and we also have a meat meal. And some of the partners that I named off earlier help provide some of the produce and some of the meat that go into these boxes. We service 300 individuals family right now. In the beginning, we started off servicing 200. We moved to 300. This has been a 16-week program. Monday will be 16 week. We will continue this program into December and service another 400 families. Thank you for listening.
Tasha, you know, what I hear you saying, I mean, when you talk about cooking, eating, and talking, and everybody coming together and exchanging ideas, even if they are different ideas, well, 2 things. One, there's so much diplomacy that happens at the table that we have gotten away from, and that's how we used to be. And also, information is power. What is one of the most surprising things that you have noticed in doing this initiative with the community?
I noticed that everybody wants to go back to the olden days. Families want to gather in the kitchen and sit down at the table and eat meals. We have been programmed to think that all we do is work, 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 and eat fast food. And what this has showed us that family want to go back to the traditional days and just have a regular meal and just sit down, eat, and have a dialogue with their family.
All right. Thank you so much, and keep doing that.
Thank you.
Last but not least, we have Lisa Harnick. Lisa is a professor at the University of Minnesota School of Public Health. She conducts research to identify policies and programs that are effective in supporting good nutrition and health for all. She also co-directs the Healthy Weight Research Center, and directs the University of Minnesota Nutrition Coordinating Center, a center that provides software and services and supports the dietary assessment needs of hundreds of researchers across the US. Please welcome Lisa Harnick.
Thank you, Carla. It is a pleasure to be here today to talk about an evaluation project we recently launched. Next slide, please. The project exemplifies the public health nutrition framework, which focuses on improving nutrition and health of millions of lives at a time through public policies and programs. Next slide. So to provide a little background on the project that we're involved with, when the pandemic hit this spring, you've already heard about how much the food system changed, and that happened at schools as well, where suddenly school food service operations needed to figure out how to get food to children. And for urban and suburban school districts, that could be done by, having families come by and pick up meals. The challenge, though, was for rural school children, how to get those meals to children in rural areas. And poverty rates are actually higher in rural areas compared to urban and suburban areas in the US, which a lot of people don't realize. So really urgent to figure out how to get those meals to kids. Next slide, please. So to address this need, a program called the Emergency Meals to You program was established by expanding a program that had been piloted by Baylor University in the summer of 2019. Through the CARES Act, funding was provided to get this Emergency Meals to You up and running quickly. And you can see at the bottom of the slide the different partner organizations. Next slide. Through the program, shelf-stable boxes of food were shipped to children in rural areas every 2 weeks. Each box had 10 breakfast and 10 lunch meals in it. More than 35 million meals were sent to over 270,000 children in 35 states between May and the end of this summer. Next slide. A key question in terms of evaluating the success and future potential of the program is whether the meals provided have high nutritional quality. And that's actually where the University of Minnesota comes in. Next slide. We have a team that's carrying out an evaluation looking at the nutritional quality of these boxes. We've got students involved in this evaluation work. It's a great opportunity for them to build their skills in evaluating public health nutrition programs while contributing to this important evaluation project. Next slide. We're very excited about being involved in evaluating one aspect of this program. The findings will inform future iterations of the program. As you heard today already, that actually rural school children, it's been a challenge to get summer meals to those children because you can imagine it's not easy to come to a pickup spot for those summer meals. And so if this program is found to be well-liked by families and provide nutritious foods, it certainly has the potential to be something that would continue into the future to address that need. So I thank you for your time. I went kind of fast because I know I'm the caboose, I'm the tail end of the presenters, and I want to save time for a little time for questions. Thank you.
You are so kind. I know. Thank you so much. I'm sorry that you felt rushed, Lisa.
No, that's fine.
I'm going to bring back Dean Finnegan. I feel like maybe we can do a few questions, a little Q&A here.
I think we can, and I do have a bunch of questions that people have been asking here. I think we could probably go another 2 or 3 hours and entertain ourselves very well, but we'll take a shot here. And this is one that let's see here. This is actually for you, Carla. Can I ask you this question?
Yes, okay, whatever it is.
What's the number one thing you do for your health?
You know, I don't eat as much meat anymore. And I know there's Meatless Monday, but I've really tried to incorporate more grains. And I mentioned millet, I mentioned sorghum. So I've really tried to incorporate grains. And I do the inverse of my plate. I have more vegetables than I have a meat protein on my plate.
Oh, wow. You know, I used to work in the Minnesota Heart Health Program when I started out here 1,000 years ago. And that's exactly what we were recommending. We said, well, there's no bad foods, but what we did want to talk about is that meat doesn't need to be the center of the plate. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad to see that that's still in vogue because I think from a health standpoint, it's a good practice. Okay, this is a question that is for Thierry, and it's a little long. I'll try to shorten it up here. Thank you for moderating, Carla, and for your volunteer and advocacy work. Researchers and chefs understand the importance of food insecurity and the downstream sequelae of this issue. At our university hospital system, we're struggling to convince leadership that they should invest in efforts to address food insecurity for inpatients. Most of the amazing programs on this webinar have been community-based. What experiences, if any, do people have with establishing return on investment for food insecurity in clinics and hospitals? Wow, Thierry, do you want to take a first shot at that?
Yes, that's a great question. Actually, at the food bank here, we have a program called FoodRx that addresses exactly this. So what we try to do is work with health providers or health insurers. And when patients are seen, they are asked the question about food insecurity. That's the first important step. It's not always the case. And then if the patient declares to be food insecure, then we work with that system, and then we provide resources to that patient. So it could be, where is your closest food shelf? Are you eligible for SNAP? Are you eligible for WIC? How can we help you with the application process? And then in some cases, not all cases, but we also provide boxes of food that are adapted to the condition of the patient. So if the patient has diabetes, the food is geared in the box is geared towards a diabetes diet. And we've done small studies that have proven that the markers of diabetes in that case have improved when we've done that. But there's certainly a lot more research to be done in that area. This is a very an area that's very exciting because we can see the results, and it's good for the patient, but it's also good for the hospital system because they can see their cost decrease and the number of visits to the clinic decrease as well. So yes, there are many nonprofit organizations around the country that are working on that.
So Rebecca, who asked the question, here's your man to convince your leadership right here. Okay, I want to ask Ellie this question. This is a question. I work for Head Start in a very rural county in Pennsylvania. I have seen so much poverty and, sadly, with all the room to grow food, an incredible amount of food insecurity. Can you speak as to why this is happening?
I'm not sure that I'm probably the best one to address this, but I will tell you that I know with the Head Start programs, and we try to do a lot of proactive work here in the state of Minnesota to support those families. And, you know, the primary source for them usually is going to be the SNAP benefit or the WIC benefit. And if they're not enrolled in school, you know, the key driver in all of this is the enrollment in the program. Now, because we have waivers and we're operating under the Summer Food Service Program currently, anybody that shows up will be able to get a meal. I don't know what's happening in Pennsylvania, but I know that in Minnesota, for example, any place that you live, if you access this mobile app, and I think Second Harvest can hop in on this too, as can the resource of the USDA Food and Nutrition Services, because they have an interactive map where you put in your address or your zip code, I think, and you can find out what meals are available to you. But in our state, you know, you can go, like if you have a school in Minneapolis that is not serving meals, they can go to any Minneapolis public school site and get meals. Why there's an increase in food insecurity and why it is so severe is the major question that keeps me up at night all the time, because there are so many wonderful services that are out there that people are getting creative. I mean, look at all the stuff that we heard about today, where you're really going above and beyond in terms of creativity and thinking deeply about the populations that you're serving. Our work is really around looking at those federal programs and saying, why isn't that we have kids that are struggling when there are subsidies available to support them? A lot of it has to do with, you know, economic indicators. I think the state of the political environment are influencers as well. And I wish I knew more about Pennsylvania. And I would be happy to do a little bit more research and forward on some information as it relates to the state, what Head Start is doing there, if that would be helpful.
All right, Ellie, thank you so much. I'm getting the signal here. I should ask one last question, and I'm gonna ask this question actually of Diane Newmark-Steiner, and then once Diane answers that, she can take us out. And we are a bit on the overtime. So Diana, hopefully you're back on here. Here's your question. With each of these, and this comes from Aaron, with each of these groups focusing on slightly different aspects of the food system, I'm curious whether there are any synergistic collaborations between the initiatives presented today, and or what might be needed to establish those types of collaboration. And so Diane, do you want to take that, and then you can take us out of the session today?
Thank you, John. So this is actually the reason why we pulled together our Food for Health 2030 initiative, because we feel like at the university we have many opportunities for outreach with our community partners, through our students, through our research, through our relationships, through our collaborations. And that's what we're hoping to do. Many of the people here sit on our board in addition to other people. And our goal is really to bring people together, to conduct high-level research, to really form partnerships, to provide training for our students, and most important, to meet the needs of our population. We are totally dedicated to the elimination of health inequities. And here in the Twin Cities, where George Floyd was murdered, where COVID is so strong, we absolutely need to be taking the lead in doing this work. So I just want to really, from the bottom of my heart, thank all of our panelists for not only for presenting today, but for the work that you're doing. And I want to thank all of our listeners for being here. If you are interested in contributing to our philanthropic effort, you can go to our School of Public Health website, our Food for Health website. I believe there is a slide for that link. Yes, here it is. And not everyone has the time to do this work, but making a financial gift can help the people on this call to help our community. So thank you. I want to also really extend a huge thank you to Carla Hall for being with us today. I wish we would have had time for a cooking demonstration and then a tasting, but that's probably not going to happen. And finally, just to remind people, you will be getting a link to this call, to this webinar, and we invite you to share it widely. Thank you for all the work that you're doing, and remember, we are all part of the solution.